You're on.
Hi, I'm Monica Keene, and I will be doing the demo tonight for Artisan bread. Many, if you've been to church potlucks, you've probably tasted it. The difference between these Artisan loaves are, a lot of Artisan bread is very dry inside. This is much more moist, it's much easier to work with. I, in years past, have struggled to make loaf bread to the point where my bread dough, my loaf bread is crumbly, it's too dry or too moist, it just doesn't hold together, and I've struggled with that. And then I stumbled upon this Artisan bread in 5. These are 2 of the recipe books made specifically for this particular style of Artisan bread. It is literally, takes you 5 minutes to throw the dough together, 2-ish hours to rise. Each batch makes roughly 3 pounds or 3 1-pound loaves. The fantastic thing about this dough is you can make 1 loaf at a time and take your dough and put it in the refrigerator. And then when you want another loaf, you just take it out, you warm your oven up. A little bit of difference that I've had that I've messed with the recipe and the directions a little bit over the years. They tell you to put it on a pizza peel with cornmeal and then slide that onto your hot pizza stone in the oven with a tray of water. I found just using a cookie sheet. I use flour. I don't use cornmeal because it's gritty. Finding really fine cornmeal can be a pain in the butt, and some people are allergic to corn. So this is a way that, it's a happy medium, and I don't need that tray of water in the stove as well, and I don't have to worry about that going dry, nothing like that. So here,
Monica,
yes.
Is the cookie sheet just ordinary, or is it multi-layered?
No, it is just an ordinary single layer. For the focaccia bread, you want something with a lip, because you're going to be putting olive oil, you're going to be drizzling quite a good layer of olive oil down, you're going to be pressing it down, and then a little bit more olive oil on top of that. So you definitely want something with a lip. It doesn't have to be insulated, an insulated thing. I don't like just the flat cookie sheets as much, because some of the flour can, kind of fall off or whatever, and it makes a mess, and that kind of burns, because you're cooking your bread at 400, at least for our elevation. I found 440 degrees is the optimal temperature for 30. If you do the full 450, like it says in the book, at our elevation, because at high elevation, things cook faster. So if you do the 450 degrees, then your bread will be a little more burnt. It'll be darker crust, and it'll be a thicker crust, not quite the tender crust that you want. So I find, at least for these recipes, 440 degrees for that 30 minutes works perfect. If you're doing something with sugar, a variation of this dough with sugar in it, or maple syrup or something like that, like the apple cinnamon, I cook it for about 5 minutes less, because otherwise that crust will be too dark. And as you can see, this is a traditional loaf. Baked for 30 minutes, that's it. Another thing I do it differently with this that is different from the book, I don't allow that resting period. So if it's refrigerated, turn the oven on, form the dough, put it, flour your cookie sheet. Go ahead and put that dough on, and as soon as that oven is warm, pop it in. Because if you wait too long, it just kind of flattens out and you'll end up with a flatter loaf. This way it keeps that round loaf, whether it's refrigerated or not. It keeps a better form, I find. The difference that's what kind of difference the sugar makes. It's kind of fascinating.
Make the same length of time?
I usually do this for about 5 minutes less.
So you did that 5 minutes less and it's still that much darker?
Yes. You can reduce it to about 23 minutes instead of a full 30. Anything less than that, your inner dough is going to be a little gummier. The other thing, because this is a moist dough, you don't want to cut into it right away, necessarily.
Yeah, it says that in the directions.
Yes. Let it rest for a few hours. It's tempting. I've cut them open, let it cool down for about half an hour to an hour, and then cut them open, and you will notice that it is a little gummier because it has not, the yeast and the yeast primarily hasn't had a chance to, dare I say, cure in your bread, and kind of finish cooking out and using it up. You can still eat it, it'll just be a lot more moist and a lot more gummy. Okay, are we ready?
And you worry about us. Don't even,
Okay.
You don't have to.
Okay. Any other questions about that? No? Okay. Super easy. One thing that you do want to make sure is making sure that you fluff your flour, because if you just scoop into a solid block of flour, you're gonna have too much flour in your each cup. So you definitely want to fluff it up, and then it's super easy. Scoop and dump. It is a very flexible recipe too. So if you have just a little bit extra flour, a little bit less flour. Oh, I forgot. I need 3 cups of warmish, hotish water.
Okay.
That was how many?
Three.
Thank you. And I do this with little ones in the house and have lost count and had too much water or too much flour. This week, making one of the loaves, I did 3.5 cups of water instead of the supposed 3 cups. And all I did was add an extra cup of water, or an extra cup of flour, and about half a teaspoon of yeast. Mixed it in, and it was good. It was so easy, super easy fix. So your 6.5 cups of flour, a tablespoon and a half of yeast, and once again, I estimate it, and it works just fine. They say, oh, you have best results if you weigh it.
Right.
I don't weigh it. I reduce the salt a little bit. It says 1.5 tablespoons of salt. I only do 1 tablespoon of salt. I find 1 tablespoon and that extra 1/2 tablespoon is way too much. It's too strong and it just ruins the dough.
Have you ever tried it with whole wheat flour?
My dough ends up being a little more dense. I forgot this rubber spatula too. You always gotta forget something, right? The whole wheat dough, or the whole wheat flours tend to be a lot more dense, and I find my, my dough is a little flatter. I'm still playing with that. They do have a recipe book that is specifically whole grain, whole wheat, or, you know, whole rye, things like that. I haven't had a lot of success with it yet, but I haven't tried it over here with the higher elevations, which can have a little bit of it, I'm finding has a different effect on baking than the lower elevations that, you know, we're used to. Yeah.
When I make bread, before I add, combine the dry ingredients with the liquid, I use what do they call it, a whip thing?
A whisk.
And mix it thoroughly, but it also loosens it up. And I may be wrong, but I think that that's part of what helps it to rise nicely and get the kind of consistency that I'm getting.
I mean, I don't have much, I haven't had issues with the rising part, with loaf bread. It's the crumb, you know, my loaf bread falls apart more. And it could be too that that maybe I need to let it sit for a little bit longer. That a little bit more than the 2 hours that they say in the book for the whole grain flours. I need to play with it a little bit more now that it's a different elevation. It changes how you know, how the yeast reacts and how it bakes. That's it.
Wow.
Seriously, that's it. You cover it, let it rise for 2.5 hours. I had bread due yesterday. Usually Tuesdays, Wednesdays are my bread day. I had some after we got home from a meeting that I had baked before the meeting, so probably about 3:30. We got home about 9:30 at night, and I still had one loaf left. And popped it in the oven, formed it, popped it in the oven, and it was just as good as it would, you know, what I had baked earlier in the day. It's so flexible. It's such a flexible recipe.
How long can you leave it in the refrigerator? Can you leave it?
7 to 10 days.
Up to 10 days?
I think it's about up to 10 days. You will, as it sits in the refrigerator, it will get more of a sourdough, like a cultured sourdough flavor. The other thing is when you do make this, if you do make a lot of bread, you can put your bowl, once this is empty, put your bowl back in the fridge, or you can start a new batch. And it ends up being more like a sourdough culture, so it'll ripen. What the leftovers will help the new batch to ripen a little bit more. And each consecutive batch, you'll get more of a sourdough flavor, because it is kind of culturing. These here, this is from my batch from yesterday. You don't need to wash out your bowl every single time, because once again, you know, you don't want to wash those cultures out. Or, I mean, if you don't eat a lot of bread, and you know, you can absolutely wash your bowls out. Okay. Here, this is the fun part, because I mean, it's so easy. We started it 440?
Tip the bowl up so they can see what it looks like.
That's it. This one is going to be a little bit heavier. It has cranberries and walnuts in it. So half cup of each is all it takes. Just lightly flour, put a good layer of flour on your cookie sheet. Typically I'll do 3. Should I go ahead and just do, I should just do a little more.
Do whatever you feel like doing. What does the oven need to be on? What can you?
440. 440 for this one, and then 425 for focaccia,
Okay.
for the other one. I do, when I'm doing bread, 3, just put a good layer of flour, because otherwise it'll stick. Make sure that your hands are good and floured, and all you're gonna do, you're gonna scrape the sides down.
You said 425 for the focaccia?
Yeah. Thanks, dear.
The little oven is for the focaccia, the big oven's for the other one.
You pull the sides down and tuck them under, and that's it. That's your dough. You want them fairly evenly spaced. And roughly grapefruit size.
I haven't been able to find grapefruit that size recently.
Pomelos, maybe?
Small cantaloupe.
There we go. These
Small
days.
cantaloupe.
Yeah.
And sometimes if you don't quite have enough flour on your hands, it's a little sticky. Just add a little bit more to get a nice round loaf. And then your bread knife, I've tried like an X-Acto and it drags. I've tried a regular straight blade and it's not quite necessarily sharp enough. A light serration, I find that the light serration, but not a like the jagged, you don't want a jagged serration on that. Oops, I forgot. You dust the tops. And I have not tried a bread lane yet, which is like a bread raiser. One of these days I'll buy that. And that's it, and then that gets popped in the oven for a half an hour. And that's your loaves. Do you want to pop that in?
Sure.
Thank you. Then do you want me to wait a couple minutes, or wait a second too?
Go ahead and do the other.
Okay. Next one is focaccia. Have any of you had focaccia?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
It's good.
it is. Have you had the sheet, have you seen them do sheet focaccia or just like the
I had both of them.
both? Okay.
Mhm.
I love focaccia.
Yeah, me too.
Timothy loves focaccia too. Have you made it before?
Mm-mm.
So easy. So easy. So olive oil, get a good layer down. Make sure that the sides of your cookie sheet are well oiled, because it does tend to stick if it's not oiled. This also works pretty well for cookie dough, or not cookie dough, pizza dough. Make sure your hands are really well oiled. And once again, work the edges down to separate it from the bowl. I like to wrap the edges again and then just coat it really well. And all you're gonna do is you're gonna just flatten it out. It takes a little bit of work, especially if it's fresh dough. If you refrigerate it, it's a little easier to work with. And then you just finger dimbles. You just keep working your fingers. You can pull it up a little bit, push some more olive oil. It's really flexible. You're not going to hurt the dough.
Now that dough sat for a couple of hours.
Yeah, I started this dough at about 3:30. Yeah. So I mean, even then, I mean, it's what time is it?
Quarter.
7, almost 7:30. So that's 4 hours. So it's double the time, and it'll be just fine. I haven't really had any issues with overproofing. So you want your dough half inch to an inch. I think half inch is pretty optimal. Slice your onions in just like a half. Slice them pretty thin, and you just sprinkle these on top. And I forgot my coarse salt. Usually I use coarse salt to sprinkle on top, and I was in such a hurry to get out of the house without the kids seeing me before Timothy woke up. Then I walked right out without him. And rosemary, fresh, well, it's not fresh. It's dried rosemary from our garden. Fresh rosemary is even better.
You should have told me I have some in there.
Oh, do you?
Yeah.
Oh, bummer. This works really good too. Herbs are so much better when you grow them at home. You don't get 3 or 4 year old herbs, and they taste better even when they're dried. And and then, like I said, usually you have coarse salt, but this works too. Just put a good sprinkle on top, and then a little bit more olive oil, just to kind of fill in those gaps. You can go ahead and put more finger dimples in there, and that's kind of what traps the olive oil in there. And then pop it in the oven for probably about 20-25 minutes until the edges are nice and golden. And that's it.
Okay, I'll pop that one in and they can ask you questions. And you can give them tips.
There we go.
That's yummy.
It smells so good already. Yeah, right?
It just needs a little sun-ripe tomatoes and olives on the edge.
Oh,
Yes,
yeah.
oh, yes. Yes. Yeah. You
To
can,
make it really Italian out of you.
one of our, Chris's cousins said you can, she likes to do hot peppers and with cheese.
Oh,
So you can do like the jalapeno focaccia, jalapeno cheddar focaccia, or garlic sprinkled on top with it. It's such a versatile recipe, I feel.
yeah.
Because it's this one base recipe, and I do garlic bread, I do herb bread, I can do cranberry walnut.
You did apple cinnamon, that one.
The
day.
apple cinnamon, yeah. Yeah. And I think probably this week sometime, or maybe next week, I'll do like cinnamon raisin. It just, yeah, just make sure that you're, like, if it's herbs or garlic, make sure it's only like a tablespoon or two. If it's something like cranberries and walnuts, make sure the whole thing is under like about a cup. So half cup of each is just about perfect, and otherwise it weighs it down too much. So I need to try a pumpkin one too. It's fun. It's fun to just kind of play with it, because it's just, you can play with it to be, yeah. So, questions?